Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Brian Liddy. It's Monday, the 6th of May, and I'm joined by two guests here this evening in Cowcaddens. We have Maureen Watt, who is a retired former SNP minister. Welcome, Maureen.
Hi,
And
Brian.
we're
Nice to
also
see you back.
joined by the indomitable Linda Fabiani, who is a former MSP minister from 1999. Linda, Maureen, welcome both.
Hi.
We're going to start the show with our, again, sadly routine Ukraine update. Today is day 803. Russian attacks on Orthodox Easter Sunday killed a woman, burying her under rubble, and injured 24 in Ukraine's northeastern city of Kharkiv and surrounds, regional officials have said. Vadim Filashkin, head of the military administration in Donetsk region, said 2 people were killed by shelling in the town of Porvosk and 2 injured in Chazivyar, east of the Russian-held town of Bakhmut. Officials in Kyiv urged residents to follow Orthodox Easter services online due to safety concerns. In his Easter address, Volodymyr Zelensky called on Ukrainians to be united in one common prayer. Standing in front of Kyiv's St. Sophia Cathedral, Zelensky called on Ukrainians to pray for each other and the soldiers on the front line. A majority of Ukrainians identify as Orthodox Christians, though the church is divided. Many belong to the Independent Orthodox Church of Ukraine. The rival Ukrainian Orthodox Church was loyal to the Patriarch in Moscow until it split from Russia after the 2022 invasion and is viewed with suspicion by many Ukrainians. In his Easter message, Vladimir Putin did not explicitly mention the war, as he attended a Moscow Easter service led by the head of the country's Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill. Russian forces have taken control of the ruined village of Okartine in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region, the Russian Defense Ministry has said. It is northwest of Avdiivka, which Russia captured in February only after huge losses of personnel and equipment. In Sumy, Russian drone attacks left critical infrastructure, including water supply and hospitals, running on backup power, officials said on Sunday. On Monday morning, that's today, Ukraine's Air Force said 13 more drones were launched by Russia over the Sumy region, and air defence systems destroyed 12 of them. Ukraine's Eurovision 2016 winner, Jamala, has said her country cannot afford to boycott the song contest because it needs the opportunity to remind Europe of Russia's invasion. There have been calls for artists to refuse to participate over Israel's inclusion while the war in Gaza continues. The opening round begins on Tuesday in Malmö in Sweden. China's President Xi Jinping has arrived in Paris, where his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, will urge Xi to use his influence with Russia over the war in Ukraine. In an article for Le Figaro, Xi said he wanted to work with the international community to find ways to solve the conflict sparked by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, while claiming that China was neither a party nor a participant in the conflict. So that was quite a lengthy update today. Linda, I'll come to you first. Was there anything there that you'd like to pick up on?
Just it's ongoing.
Oh,
The
I think
issue
you're on mute,
isn't it?
Linda.
Um,
No, so should we go to
I
Maureen first, maybe?
okay.
Yeah, okay. Maureen, uh, I'm not hearing Linda here in the studio. I can you hear us now, Linda? Or can we?
Yes, hello there, Brian. We
That's
seem to
great,
have had a
thank you.
wee technical issue. Um, yeah, I was just saying that it's depressing. Here we are, the Ukraine ongoing. I think that the thing that would strike me in your report today is, more territory taken in Okartine. But the other thing is, Russia seems to be being fairly successful in taking out infrastructure, more hospitals, water supplies, and that is extremely worrying.
Thank you, Linda. Apologies for the glitch there. I couldn't hear you, but I can hear you now. Maureen, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, it just seems that both sides are entrenched in the trenches, and using the same type of warfare. I mean, I think I heard in the last few days that Ukraine was also targeting energy infrastructure inside Russia's borders. So perhaps they're being a bit more bold. But obviously, when the 61 billion, was it, of US dollars is translated into armory and weaponry for Ukraine, hopefully during the rest of spring and summer. That won't make a big difference, but I don't hold my breath on it.
No, and I'm sure it won't be the last day anytime soon when we'll be doing these updates, sadly. And then, of course, moving on to the situation in Israel and Gaza. Scott Anderson, the Senior Deputy Director of United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, better known as UNRWA, said that the closing of Kerem Shalom and other aid passages threatens the critical fuel supply in Gaza. Quote, everything we do in Gaza is run by diesel. We currently have 1 day of diesel on hand. If we don't have a resume by tomorrow, everything will stop, he said to CNN. President Biden is reported to have demanded that Israel immediately reopen the Kerem Shalom crossing, one of the key routes for bringing aid into Gaza, during a call with Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday. Israel's minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has agreed to ensure that the Kerem Shalom crossing is open for humanitarian assistance, following the call from President Biden, according to the White House. During the 30-minute phone call, Biden and Netanyahu also spoke about ongoing hostage negotiations and Israel's upcoming ground invasion of Rafah. Thousands of people are evacuating from Rafah, Gaza's southernmost city, hours after the Israeli military told residents and displaced people in eastern neighbourhoods to leave in advance of a long-threatened attack on the city and its environs. Witnesses described frightened families leaving the city on foot, riding donkeys, or packed with their belongings into overloaded trucks on Monday. Overnight, Israeli airstrikes had reinforced panic and fear, prompting more to heed the instructions to move. The Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, said they had dropped leaflets and were broadcasting instructions through announcements, text messages, phone calls, and media broadcasts in Arabic, telling residents to head to what is called an expanded humanitarian zone on the coast. A senior Hamas official described the Israeli order for civilians to evacuate Rafah as a dangerous escalation that will have consequences. Palestinian news agency Wafa has reported that 22 Palestinians, including 8 children, have been killed by Israeli strikes on Rafah since yesterday evening. In a televised address on Sunday, Benjamin Netanyahu rejected Hamas's demands for a definitive end to the war in Gaza, saying that any permanent ceasefire would allow the Islamist organisation to remain in power and pose a continuing threat to Israel. Egypt has raised its military level of preparedness in northern Sinai, which borders the Gaza Strip. Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, has said his organisation will not be evacuating Rafah. Noga Weiss, who was one of the hostages seized by and abducted by Hamas on the 7th of October, then released in November last year as part of a ceasefire and hostage release deal, has enlisted today in the IDF. Germany has criticised Netanyahu's government for its decision to ban Al Jazeera in Israel, saying it was the wrong signal. Israeli officials have claimed the move was justified because Al Jazeera was a threat to national security. So, Maureen, I'll come to you first on this one. Was there anything in the Gaza update that caught your eye?
Yes, well, there seems to be quite a lot of movement if I'm listening to Sky News properly, in that it would appear that Qatar has been trying to negotiate a ceasefire, as we know, for many months. And there appears to be terms to which Hamas says they can agree to, but we've not heard a response from Israel. And I think that's because they want to completely obliterate Gaza. And Rafah is the last part of Gaza, if you like, still standing, which they haven't obliterated. And clearly that is their mission, as they say, because they don't feel that they have managed to kill or maim or disable all of Hamas yet. And the fact that they're talking about people having to evacuate Rafah and move to beaches that are already crowded, I mean, it's just like kettling on an immense scale, and you've got nowhere to go with the sea on one side and devastation on the other. It's just horrific.
Thank you, Maureen. You just remind me of that expression that's used about Gaza being the biggest open-air prison on the planet. Linda, is there anything that you want to add?
Just to follow up on what Maureen said, I was also looking at the reports about Hamas having agreed to the Qatar-Egypt ceasefire proposal. Israel not having even responded, just before I came on air, I understand. And, like Maureen, I'm so suspicious of everything that Netanyahu and his government do in the name of Israel. They agreed to keep the aid passages open. It hasn't happened. They're closing down journalists all the time, and they have Al Jazeera completely. I don't reckon that if this keeps up, that Al Jazeera will be the last to get shut down. They promised people if they moved to Rafah, they'd be safe, and now they're trying to move them on again. It was a word I hesitated to use for a long time because of the implications in the word and the seriousness of it, and that is genocide. But I tell you what, that's how it is now with what they're doing. I think the word is perfectly justified.
Thank you, Linda. Yes, sobering thought. So we'll move on to the next item of this evening. So today, John Swinney was confirmed as the new leader of the Scottish National Party, the SNP. And this evening, we've got John Swinney's full acceptance speech after it was announced that he was the new leader here in Glasgow today.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to my friends and colleagues. A special welcome to broadcasters and press on this beautiful bank holiday Monday. Warm welcome to you all. So glad you could all join us. And without much further ado, it's my great pleasure to hand over to the National Secretary of the Scottish National Party, Lorna Finn.
Thank you. I'm happy to confirm today that at the close of nominations at midday, I received one valid nomination, and I'm delighted to confirm that our new party leader is John Swinney.
Friends, first of all, can I thank Lorna and the party staff for the professional way this leadership process has been run at such short notice, enabling the Scottish National Party to get back on the front foot so quickly. A year ago, well, even a week ago, I didn't think that my future would involve standing here accepting the leadership of the Scottish National Party. Things have turned out differently. And before I say any more about my leadership, I want to pay tribute to Humza Yousaf. He has conducted himself throughout the last year with grace and with dignity in some acutely difficult circumstances. In particular, His moral leadership on the issue of Gaza has been a light in these dark times. Our party must continue and will continue to be a light. We must continue to illuminate hope, fight for international justice, and be willing to stand up for what we believe to be correct. That is what Humza Yousaf did. I know that Humza will continue to make a substantial contribution to the public life of Scotland, and I want to thank him for all that he has done as our party leader and as our First Minister. Today is the beginning of a new chapter in our party's history, a chapter that will be about coming together, uniting and dedicating ourselves to the service of Scotland. I want to express my heartfelt thanks to the many party members, the many elected members at Westminster and at Holyrood, and in our council chambers around the country for their encouragement for me to stand for the party leadership. My decision to stand for the leadership is not born out of long-held ambition, but rather a profound sense of duty to my party and to my country. Now, I know there's some controversy that I'm the only candidate to stand for the leadership. Perhaps not surprisingly, I take a very different view to that. For me, the fact that I am the only candidate demonstrates that the Scottish National Party is coming back together again now. I promised that I would create an inclusive and unified team, and I will do that. I promised I would enable open and respectful dialogue in the SNP, and I will do that. I promised to make sure that the SNP looks outward to the people of our country and not inward amongst ourselves, and I will do that. I've had the privilege of contributing a significant amount to the SNP story. In that time, I've seen the lows and the highs of our modern political history as a party. And over those highs and lows, one thing has been clear to me time after time. Scotland wins when the SNP wins. Yes, we faced a rough time recently as a party, but remember what's been happening during that rough time. The Scottish Child Payment is lifting 100,000 children out of poverty. Free university tuition opens a better future to record numbers of young people from poorer backgrounds. And the massive expansion of childcare is giving children from every background a better start in life. So, however tough it has recently been for the SNP, never ever forget that at the same time, SNP policies and actions are transforming lives here and now in our country. As I begin my leadership of the party I love, I want to speak not just to everyone here at this SNP gathering. I want to speak to each and every person in this country, to those who know me and those who don't, to those who support the SNP and those who never have, and to those who support independence and those that we are yet to convince. I want to set out the vision I have of our nation's future. I said when I launched my candidacy for leadership that I wanted to create a modern, diverse, dynamic Scotland. Today, I'm standing in a building that speaks of that future. It's the Advanced Research Centre of the University of Glasgow. Here in the heart of one of our oldest universities in Europe, research into the newest leading-edge technologies push back the boundaries of what is possible. Experience and innovation combined. History and modernity together, forging a new future. That is the perfect vision for Scotland. A country with a depth of history can blend the old and the new and forge it together into the best future for herself. A country where people have good jobs, the climate is protected, the vulnerable are lifted up, and opportunity is available for all. That is the chapter, the new chapter that I offer. One built on experience, on skills honed over decades. Every moment of my journey devoted to building the new Scotland I believe is possible. Later this week, Scotland will choose a new First Minister. In putting my name forward, it's important that I set out what kind of First Minister I will be. I spoke last week about unifying our party and about what we can do for Scotland together. I believe the same is true of our Parliament. In 2021, the share of the vote commanded by Labour, the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats all fell. The SNP recorded our best ever share of the constituency vote. In fact, we won more votes and a higher share of the votes in the constituency ballot than any party in the 25-year history of devolution. That is our mandate, but it does not give us a monopoly on good ideas. It means that we have the right, in fact, we have the duty to form the government, but it does not mean that we can stop listening to people and voices outside our party. The polarisation of politics does not serve our country well. Too often, too many people are too busy fighting to win battles when we should be seeking solutions to problems. That is what I pledge I will seek to do. I will reach out to everyone willing to join with us in good faith and seek compromises that serve our nation well. That does not mean that debate will end, far from it. But it does mean that should I be elected, I will first seek common ground, to join together in coalitions of the willing and solve the problems that our country faces. We need to stop shouting at each other and talk to each other. More than that, actually, we need to listen. And as First Minister, I will do exactly that. And friends, I believe recent events show that this approach works. Last week, I met with Kate Forbes. We came together and discussed the shared ambitions we have for our country and how best we can go forward. I welcome Kate's support for my leadership. And over the weekend, I reached out to my party colleague Graham McCormick. He wanted to stand for election so he could be heard. So I listened and assured him that the views of party members up and down the country will be properly listened to. The simple lesson is that dialogue can bring us to points of agreement and strength. And that is my message today to every party in the Scottish Parliament. Focus on solutions to problems, and you will find no one more willing to listen than me. Together, we can make a real difference to the lives of people in Scotland. That's the job we have all been sent to Parliament to do. Of course, I believe this country could do more if we had the powers of a normal, independent nation, the powers of independence. The cost of living crisis and the damaging impact of Brexit are two examples of Westminster decisions that are bad for Scotland. They demonstrate why Scotland needs to have independence to make our own decisions and create our best future. I will always seek, with respect and courtesy, to persuade people of the case for independence. All I ask of those who oppose that vision is that they also act with the same courtesy and respect. That means independence is not a reason for them to refuse to work with us to build the economy, to support jobs, and to improve the health service. If elected as First Minister, my focus will be the economy, jobs, the cost of living. It will be the National Health Service, our schools and our public services. It will be addressing the climate crisis. So to everyone in every party, to every MSP, to every MP, in fact to everyone in our great country, I say this: join me. Don't let our disagreements dominate. Join me as we open a new chapter, as we create a vibrant economy in every part of our country, as we tackle the challenges faced by the NHS, as we build on the strengths in our schools, as we build more homes, take climate action, improve public transport and create jobs. That's my job. That's our job. And I plan to get the job done. Thank you very much.
So that was John Swinney's acceptance speech today in Glasgow. I probably should have said to viewers earlier on that tonight we're not going to be doing, we're doing a special as a bank holiday Monday, concentrating on what's going on in Holyrood and in the SNP. And we've actually got a second video, but which is Libby Brooks of The Guardian's question to John Swinney. But I'm loath to kind of go straight to it. I'd really like to maybe, Linda, ask you first. What did you think of John's acceptance speech today?
It was just very John. I thought it was marvellous. I was absolutely delighted at what's happened, and that John is a leader of my party, the SNP. And one thing that struck me, Brian, very, very strongly, as it has over the last few days when I've seen his interviews, I was in Parliament when John was party leader in opposition, and I've heard some really truculent political commentators say, oh, it was a problem, but for goodness sake, that was 20 years ago, We have a completely different John Swinney here, who has years and years of experience in government as Deputy First Minister. And the idea that you can say that it's the same person as 20 years ago is just ludicrous. But what is the same as 20 years ago is that passion for independence, passion for freedom for his country, but also the passion to do what's best for Scotland and for everyone in Scotland. He's a caring, decent man. And to me, that just shines from John. And I loved listening to his speech today because it was like having a conversation with the country to say, look, we can do this. We can all move forward together. So he's brought his party together already, by being leader. That's become very obvious to me in conversations we've had. And now we have the opportunity for John Swinney as First Minister to bring the country together and to move forward, because times are hard and we need somebody like John with the knowledge and the compassion and the ability to get on with others. And as he says, let political parties in our Parliament come together to do what's the best for the country, and John will lead that.
Thank you, Linda. And just Maureen, briefly, it's agreed that John Swinney also gave a belter of a speech when he stood, he's launched his candidacy. And today, you mentioned economy, jobs, cost of living, schools, climate change, and transport. But I don't think, did he mention independence?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, I think he did. He said that he wanted Scotland to be a normal country like any other that had full powers, which to me is independence. I mean, he said that he didn't think that a week ago he'd be standing here, and I'm sure he didn't. It was just a week ago today that Hamza resigned, and he quite clearly said it was not ambition on his part, but duty to party and country. And I think that's absolutely true of John. He's been in the party such a long time. From the backbenches, he could probably see that the party in government and in the country was in serious difficulty. And he realised, I hope, that he is practically the only person who, as Linda said, can bring the party together and get on with governing the country. And, his call, which I hope we'll come on to when discussing 25 years of the Parliament about respectful dialogue, is really important. And what he hammered home, I think, was that when the SNP wins, Scotland wins. And it's really important that we keep reminding the people of Scotland of the huge number of achievements of an SNP government working for the people of Scotland. I think in all the hubris and chaotic political scene that seems to be the politics of the present, that the real issues that people are concerned with get a bit lost. And I can see John bringing that back. He's been an MSP since 1999. All of the 25 years he was in Westminster before that. And he is a wily person. He can be very good at getting things out of Westminster. He managed to claw back money when he was finance secretary. So I can see him working for Scotland, not just within the Parliament and government, but also in dealings with Westminster. His time on the Smith Commission, along with Linda, taught both of them an awful lot about how Westminster sees Scotland and the Scottish government. And I think things have even deteriorated since then. So there is lots, I think, people coming forward now with new ideas about what can be done. So I am very excited about the future of Scotland under John Swinney.
Thank you, Maureen, especially that reminder about Linda having been on the Smith Commission with John. It would be great to ask your insights on that. But time is against us, and we've got another video. We've got another video for you, which is Libby Brooks's question to John Swinney, and it does kind of answer. I'd asked if John Swinney had mentioned independence, and so we find out what his views are on independence here now.
Libby Brooks.
Thank you, and congratulations again. Why do you think it is that the polls are showing that independent supporters are becoming less likely to support the SNP?
I think the SNP's been having a tough, rough time. It's lacked cohesion. I think that's come across to members of the public, and they're worried about where we are as a party. But interestingly, and the great feedback I get from my experienced peers around the country, in the last couple of days, some of my very wise colleagues have been out and about in our communities. And one colleague sent me a message the other day saying they were worried about how the SNP was getting on, but they were glad to see we're getting our act together. Well, we've got our act together this afternoon, and believe you me, we'll get our act together tomorrow, the day after that. So, and Libby, I take the view that if somebody's an independent supporter in Scotland and they want Scotland to be independent, there's only one political party that will ever deliver it, and that's the Scottish National Party. So I want to earn those votes back. So I want to, and I need to earn those votes back. If there's some disaffection between people who support independence, who previously voted for the SNP, I will be working very, very hard to win those people back.
So there we have it, a very poised and self-confident John Swinney, now leader of the Scottish National Party. We're actually out of time on that, but I'm going to steal a couple of minutes, if I may, so to kind of carry on the chat about this. Linda, right at the start of his speech, Swinney said that the fact that he was the only valid nomination meant that that reunification of the SNP party is starting now. But was it really that bad before?
I don't think it was as bad as many commentators were talking about, to be honest, Brian. But I would be wrong to pretend there was no issues. Of course, there've been issues. I mean, we all know the very public ones that have been going on. But there has been, for some time, a level of disquiet and discontent at local constituency levels within the party. A frustration that perhaps members weren't being listened to. And it's worth remembering, actually, that it was John Swinney as party leader previously, all these many, many years ago, who revised the constitution of the party and made it more democratic for individual members. For example, it was him that introduced one member, one vote, and sort of restructured the party in his time, both as a deputy leader and leader back then. So there's a feeling that some of that had been lost. But I think John's absolutely right in saying we've now achieved unity, because folk recognise the worth of John Swinney straight away. They recognise how genuine he is and in his belief in democracy, how much he loves the party. So I would say that that has unified the party. You will always have malcontents, of course you will. That's what democracy is always about. All about. You'd have people who, it doesn't matter what you do, would not agree, and that is their right. But I was really pleased that Graham McCormick, for example, who I know and who's a clever guy, having had discussion with John, feels content that he and John are on the same page, and that's important too, because Graham does have support, and but him and John go back a long way, so there's a recognition one to the other, and interesting that no one else has wanted to challenge John or put their names forward that we've seen. And we now have a new leader, and we now have a degree of unity that we haven't had for some time.
Thank you, Linda. There is, of course, the SNP grassroots member that stood, but we don't really have time to go into that. There's a question that I'd like to ask both of you. Mr. McCormick, as you mentioned, Linda, but there's two questions that I'd like to ask you both, and so I'm wondering if we can stay wide so we get more of a kind of cover more ground. And it's about the future from here on in, now that Mr. Swinney is the leader. So let's say then that he does become First Minister. I know there's a good chance that Douglas Ross and Anna Sarwar and maybe other Lib Dem MPs maybe are going to possibly stand to be First Minister. But let's say that he does become First Minister of Scotland. And then there's Kate Forbes and Humza Yousaf. Do you think, so there's talk about a senior cabinet post for Kate Forbes. So what do you think? Have you heard any gossip? Would it be finance or deputy leader for her? But I'd also like to ask you, what about Humza Yousaf? Is there any chance of him getting a cabinet post? I think, Maureen, I think it's your turn to speak if I'm...
Okay.
In your opinion?
So, I mean, clearly John will be giving thought now to whom he wants in his cabinet, and I would be very surprised if Kate Forbes didn't get a very senior job, and I hope she will, so that her followers get behind John and his new cabinet and ministerial team. I suspect that Humza, if he's offered a post, will not want it. He's had a very bruising 13 months, and I would think that he wants to kind of rest a bit and take stock at the moment. He's still got, lots to contribute to the cause. And the time to do it. He's still a very young man, but they are expecting another baby, himself and Nadia, and I suspect that he'll want to take the time to make preparations for that and enjoy that before considering whether return to government is something that he wants. I think he's had several ministerial and cabinet posts. I think he'll maybe want to do a John Swinney, but I don't think he will return like John has. But I wouldn't rule out him coming back in the future if he wants to stay in politics.
Thanks, Maureen. And Linda, the same to you, but maybe just more about, Swinney did say that he wants his cabinet to be inclusive. But so what do you think the makeup might be? And would there be...
gosh, it's hard to tell. I mean, it's entirely in the gift of the First Minister. His cabinet and indeed his government, junior ministers too. I mean, he's made it quite plain that he would like Kate to be part of that government. Be interesting to see what post she's offered, and indeed whether she accepts what she's offered. So I hope she does, because she's a smart young woman, and a very decent young woman generally. There's been some frustrations, of course there have, but I rate Kate very highly. So What will the government look like? I have an opinion, of course, but my opinion goes for nothing. It's up to the party leader. I would like to see a more simplified sort of structure of government with more defined portfolios. I mean, it was something I said at one branch meeting recently. I find it all quite confusing. I would like very clear headings of what people are responsible for, and I would like to see all these things working together to form a cohesive way of going forward for the government. I mean, John said that the party lacked cohesion. I actually think for a long time our government has lacked a bit of cohesion for all sorts of reasons. Coalitions, by any other name, can be quite difficult to work with too. So I would like to see a simplified structure so that everybody knows who to hold accountable for lots of different things. And I think that makes for good government.
Thanks, Linda. And I just can't resist that reminder from Maureen that you worked with John Swinney on the Smith Commission.
Oh yeah.
So what was that like then, working so closely with him on such a big issue?
It was pretty hectic. It was a very truncated commission, and there were two representatives. It was following the referendum, for anyone that doesn't remember. It was following the 2014 referendum. There had been the big vow of all these extra powers for Scotland. Gordon Brown had said we would be as near to federalism as possible, all of that. And the commission was formed, and John and I were the two SNP representatives. John was the lead representative, of course, because he had the finance brief. It was fascinating. I think Maureen mentioned earlier what a dirty and brilliant negotiator John Swinney is. That was very plain on the Smith Commission. We argued hard. John argued hard with me backing him up for many more powers than we eventually got, but we did achieve some. Nothing at all like what the vow was or the promise was. We got some more tax powers, we got a small amount of social security powers, and I would say, by the way, that the SNP has been very successful in forming Social Security Scotland and making it a much more dignified system than south of the border. One of the very, very important things that we fought hard for is on the face of the report of the Smith Commission. It's very clear that Scotland has the right to decide its own future and that no one should stop that. Well, there's one of the Smith Commission decisions that the UK government has decided to kick into touch and not respect. So I'm pretty sure that John Swinney will be reminding whatever UK government comes next that was something that was agreed cross-party. And I'm sure that there'll be a general discussion with the party leaders in Holyrood about respecting both the outcome of the Smith Commission and respecting Scotland's right to decide its own future as part of the ongoing negotiations.
Thank you, Linda. And Maureen, again, I'm going to continue to steal a wee bit more time here. I'm just thinking that we haven't really said much about John Swinney's when he said he was going to stand just the other day there, and there's two things that struck me. Was one that he said that he wasn't going to be a caretaker, because a lot of people were saying, oh, he's ready to retire and he'll just be there for a wee while until the next First Minister comes along, but he said no, absolutely not. And also just the fact that he reminded people that he's won every election he's ever stood for since 1997, and he got 10 budgets through a minority government. And I know that you were in Holyrood, you're both ministers at the time, so is there anything that maybe that we haven't spoken about that I've missed that you want to say? That
I think I would just stress what John said in his speech about respectful dialogue. He was always prepared to listen to the ideas and concerns of other parties. And I think that is what is grossly lacking in this current Parliament, that the other parties are opposition for opposition's sake and not putting the interests of Scotland first. And I think that there's a real opportunity here for John Swinney to show his mettle and how he will work hard to try and get the other parties to put the interests of Scotland first. And if they have ideas and amendments that they want to put to bills that are reasonable, that John Swinney and his ministerial team will listen to those, because we have to, because the SNP government is now a minority government. I think from listening to Patrick Harvey today that the Greens will help, but it's not guaranteed anymore because it's not a kind of formal agreement like the Butte House agreement was. But nevertheless, we can't rely on the Greens. And so I think John Swinney will be reaching out. And I think that's to the benefit of the whole of Scotland, because if the Parliament is seen motoring forward for Scotland on the economy, on social justice and on climate change, then people will have more respect for the Parliament. If not, I think Labour and the Tories need to be called out on the fact that they're clearly just being destructive and don't really believe in Scots having their own parliament and having all the powers, more powers and all the powers that it needs. I think this is a kind of a crossroads for the opposition parties in the Scottish Parliament.
Thank you, Maureen. And Maureen just mentioned there, respectful dialogue, and there was an excellent example of how that's lacking in Holyrood at the moment. If you saw First Minister's questions the other day, Linda, excuse me, when Douglas Ross called John Swinney by his nickname on his John, and and then refused to apologise 4 times, I think, when Alison Johnson asked him to. Do you think there will be will either Anna Sarwar or Douglas Ross stand, or is it going to be a coronation? Just quickly.
Oh, I think they'll probably stand. And it's become what we do. You know, it's become what the Parliament does. It's been like that since day one. You know, remembering back, even when it was Donald Dewar, I think from memory, you make the play of others standing. It's a way to have a speech, have your voice heard and put your views across. And there's not many politicians at that level, at leadership level, that won't take that opportunity every given time. But, you know, I think, you know, when you look at the way the Parliament is now, and I mean, Douglas Ross is just a wee horror as far as I'm concerned, very rude man. When you look at that, how that is, and that lack of respect we have now, it wasn't like that way back. And I hope it's a turning point that kind of thing changes, because, you know, when you look at what has happened in the Parliament over 25 years, even back to day one, there's been good things happened. The Parliament has been good for Scotland. And even when we were in opposition, if you look back, it was the first 8 years when you had the Labour and Lib Dem coalition, you'd things like free personal care came in. Now that was unanimously agreed. That was unanimously agreed by the Parliament nearly 25 years ago. And all parties backed it, even the Tories. Now, it's hard to imagine that you would get absolutely unanimous agreement on something now, because politics has become so polarised. But I would like to get back to that, looking at issues and how they benefit the country, not how they benefit, or the perception of how they benefit individual politicians and political parties. So that's what I'd like to see us going back to, at that crossroads that Maureen mentioned.
Okay, thank you, Linda, which brings us nicely on to the next item, which is the SNP has today highlighted that the achievements of the Scottish Parliament over the past 25 years shows things are better when decisions are made in Scotland for Scotland. Mm-hmm. On the 25th anniversary of the first Scottish Parliament elections, SNP MSP Shona Robson has said the achievements of devolution have helped to protect citizens in Scotland from cruel decisions by Westminster governments and allowed Scotland to chart a better course. The Deputy First Minister, who was elected to Holyrood in the 1999 Scottish Parliament elections, pointed to forward-looking social policies devolution has enabled the SNP to deliver, and said independence would allow Scotland to further improve everyday life for all who live and work in Scotland. Maureen, sorry, Maureen. Yes, you were there. No, I don't know. How long were you in Holyrood for? Basically, I suppose let's just ask the. Sorry, I'll just ask the question because we are running out of time. Is like there are people who think that Hollywood is a waste of time and should be closed. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely not. And anybody who suggests that forgets that before the Scottish Parliament, perhaps there was 1.5 days a year devoted to Scottish policy making, which was required in Scotland. Scottish Questions happens, once every 6 or 8 weeks, and that's just for half an hour. Don't forget that Scotland is largely rejected and not a priority in any way, shape, or form for Westminster. I mean, one of the reasons that I joined the Scottish National Party was because living and working in the southeast, I realised that nobody in government or anywhere near government cared one iota for anything north of Watford. And we've seen that with, the city regions in the north crying out for more resources to help there. And at last, maybe there is some recognition of that. So anyone who thinks that there's no need for the Scottish Parliament is living in some sort of parallel universe. As Linda's pointed out, and she has been there all of the 25, from 1999 to 2021, the Scottish Parliament has achieved a huge amount for the people of Scotland. And it's unfortunate that we keep having to remind people just what has happened and how different Scotland is from England. Some of the challenges are the same because of the disastrous economic policy of this government in particular since 2010, which is a long time. But a lot of them are very different, and Scotland must tackle its problems in a way which is particular to the needs of Scotland and its people. And yes, I think there are people who do want to destroy the Scottish Parliament and particularly the Scottish Government. And I think that's because they see the opinion polls 50-50 for independence, and that scares them slightly. So that's why they've been at every turn trying to do down the Scottish Parliament.
Thank you, Maureen. And Linda, I suppose the same question for you. What would you say to somebody who suggested to you that Holyrood should be disbanded?
They're few and far between. Every study, people moan about their governments. People moan about their parliaments. It's what we do. Everybody does. You're never happy all the time. But any academic in the field who carries out proper research will tell you that study after study, there is big support for having the Parliament as an institution here in Scotland. People would not vote to get rid of the Parliament. And I think one of the sad things is my view of what the Tories are doing just now is not just trying to have a go at the Scottish Government, they're trying to do down the whole institution, because I think they would happily get rid of the Scottish Parliament now. When you think back to 99, when the Tories came in, they'd voted against having Parliament in Scotland. But they then appeared to say, well, do you know what, okay, the people have spoken, we are Democrats, so we have to try and make it the best that it is. I don't think the current Tory party, UK Tory party in Scotland feels that way at all, and they're just trying to do down the institution all the time. I find that very sad. But what I find even sadder is that the likes of Scottish Labour have jumped on that bandwagon and become oppositionists for the sake of it. I don't know if they actually realise that they are damaging the institution of the Parliament constantly. when they do this. Opposition for opposition's sake. So I hope very, very much that they will listen to John Swinney and that they will start to respect opposing views and recognise, as John says, that you can't refuse to work with somebody because they have a different core belief than you do. I heard Maureen saying last week, why are we supposed to renege on our heartfelt passion for independence? They never think that they should perhaps renege on their belief in unionism. And she's absolutely right. Surely we can work together for the good of the country. And I hope John Swinney can achieve that. Let's have a really good 25th year anniversary for the Parliament with a reset and a moving forward to the benefit for Scotland. It'll not be the benefit that independence would be. Of course it won't, but let's get back on track.
That's great. Thank you, Linda. And so we've got about 3-4 minutes left. Maureen, you mentioned how Scottish Questions in Westminster only comes around about once a month or 6 weeks or so. Not only that, but it's really noisy in the chamber because they're all starting to file in for PMQs and nobody's listening, But anyway, that's not what I'm going to... It's just another problem that I have with it. So I'm kind of thinking about devolution and whether it's been a success or not. John Swinney talked about 100,000 children being lifted out of poverty, expansion in childcare, etc. So if devolution is successful in that way, is it going to be a step to independence or a hurdle, like a victim of its own success?
Well, I think it's been a step to independence because people have seen what we can manage to do on our own. And when we have asked for more powers, that's been with the backing of the Scottish people. And I think as we get more powers, Linda mentioned earlier, Social Security Scotland and how they treat people with dignity and respect. And if you've come across anyone or helped anyone with that, you can see the huge difference that happens there between benefits which are controlled by Scotland and Scottish agencies compared to those still under Westminster. And, talking about the 25 years, Linda and I have been at an event because there are loads of events already have already happened and are happening over the next few months to recognise 25 years, and academics are very interested in what people, including former MSPs, think about it. And one of the things that was highlighted in one of the events that we were at last week was the different approach between the Tories in particular now compared to in the early days. David McCletchie and Annabel Goldie realised that the Tories were never going to be in a position to win a Scottish Parliament election. And therefore, it was incumbent on them as opposition leaders, as opposition parties, to make sure that legislation that was going through Parliament was the best that it could be. So they came up with sensible amendments and were prepared to speak to the government of the time, whether it was Labour, Lib Dems, or then subsequently SNP governments, to see that if their amendments could be incorporated. And sometimes they were perfectly reasonable, and that happened. And, discussions prevailed so that compromise and agreement could be reached and legislation got through Parliament. What we see nowadays, particularly recently under Douglas Ross, has been opposition for opposition's sake. And I hope that under John Swinney, parliamentarians in the Scottish National Party call out the opposition parties at every stage that they are working against the interests of the Scottish people with their continued oppositionism. And let's see where we get if that happens daily and people really see the opposition for what they are.
Thank you, Maureen. Linda, we are actually out of time, but just really quickly for you, just so you get something to say on that. If there was one thing that you could change about Holyrood, what would it be? So, for example, would you drop proportional representation and bring in PR? So I want you to get back to what's left of the bank holiday weekend.
Yes, I would.
First past the
I
post,
support
sorry.
a single transferable vote system in Holyrood. I mean, that is my party's policy anyway, long-standing one. It's interesting that the hybrid of first past the post and then a degree of regional elected members, I was supposed to stop any party getting a majority, and of course it didn't from 2011 to 16. But I've never been a fan of that particular system. I would like to see a full single transferable vote system for Holyrood and the way forward. And I think there should be discussion too about the powers that are there and how they are properly managed, because I think that has difficulties as well. But of course, there was one single thing for me that would make it much more useful as an institution would be that we had a parliament in an independent Scotland that truly made all the decisions for the country.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Maureen. We've gone over time by a minute or two, but thank you again for your patience with me and for staying here. And so, yeah, let you get back to what's left of the bank holiday weekend. So that's all there is for this evening. But before we go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please do consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, we thank you very much. Our focus now moves on to securing the future of independent broadcasting for Scotland by growing our subscriber base and regular funding. But once again, thank you to our guests, to Maureen Watt. Maureen, thank you, and to Linda Fabiani. Again, Linda, thank you. And thank you to you at home. And so goodbye, and thank you for watching.